right, welcome back to another episode of Rock M Reacts. For the first time this season, coming off of a loss here at Faroe Field, LSU wins 49-39. We saw a game in which the offenses combined for over 1,000 yards, plenty of heroics from both Brady and Jaden Daniels. We saw stellar first half from the Mizzou defense, and then the second half faded away towards the end there. Team was largely outscored in the second half, and LSU gets the game-sealing pick six at the end of the day. We'll start off with kind of the headline of this game was the perimeter matchups between wide receivers and defensive backs, kind of on both sides of the ball. LSU's secondary was reeling coming into this game a bit. Mizzou's receivers were hot. LSU's receivers were red hot, but so was Mizzou's secondary as well. So first and foremost, kind of on both sides, how do you evaluate how some of Mizzou's guys held up against LSU's talent?
It was kind of a, tale of two halves. In the first half, we saw Missouri's offense. It seemed like they were just clicking, going right down the field. Burden was getting open. Mookie Cooper, he had a nice game as well. And, it seemed like Missouri receivers, they were just picking up yards in the first half. But then something kind of just changed in the second half. LSU's offense came to life for sure in the final two quarters. And it was kind of what Mizzou was doing through the first 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we saw Burden was incredibly involved in that first half. Really didn't get a ton of looks. I believe only one reception in the second half. They didn't go for many yards. Theo Weiss had a solid game. Mookie Cooper had a solid game as well. I believe a season high and might be a career high with Mizzou of 80 yards, 7 catches. I think they held up against Zai Alexander for LSU did have a pretty solid game, led them in tackles as well. So I think it was a somewhat improved LSU defense this week, but Mizzou still took advantage of their weak points. And to your point, tale of two halves, I think the Mizzou secondary really held up well. You saw Rakestraw was really fiery early in this game, physical, getting after it. KAD made some great plays throughout the game, but that second half, it's tough to contain Daniels, Neighbors, Brian Thomas, etc. for 4 quarters, and you saw that today. Daniels escaping, we'll get into later on, but Thomas and Neighbors are just such tough matchups, and they still ended up with over 200 yards combined, a pair of scores, I believe. So it's tough. It was a matchup of future NFLers on both sides. It was really entertaining to watch throughout. I think I don't look at the struggles of this defense, and this will kind of segue us into that. I don't look at KAD and Ennis as any part of that issue for the most part. It's really elsewhere. We saw, Johnny Walker get ejected from this game due to unsportsmanlike penalty, apparently spitting on a player, according to the referee's hot mic, which, as Drinkwood said post-game, is inexcusable, especially for a defensive end that came into this game as arguably this team's top pass rusher, and was really needed going up against a guy like Daniels. Secondary struggled at times. Safety pass coverage was still, it's been a concern for really the past year and a half, and it was still there. And the defensive pass rush without Johnny Walker was really non-existent. And after containing Daniels well in that first half, he had plenty of lanes to scramble through in the second. So just kind of your level of concern with the defense moving forward, and also just kind of how they were able to handle a running quarterback like Daniels when they knew coming in that was a huge part of his game.
Well, yeah, we have to first think about just how great of a quarterback Jaden Daniels is, and there's not that many like him in college football, but it was concerning. You want Mizzou to be able to be up there with those elite teams in this defense that we've kind of praised for the last season and a half now. Kind of collapsed. It was 1,000 total yards combined by both offenses, but Daniels, there was a lot of, I know on that touchdown run, it seemed like there's a lot of bad angles on that quarterback draw that he scored for, I think it was 35 yards out. And then on that same play, I think Drinkwood said someone, wasn't in contain for the quarterback. So that was very alarming. But he also had, another huge scramble on the next possession that ended up being a touchdown to Neighbors that ultimately sealed the game. And then he had that 3rd and 9 conversion down here for 14 yards. So overall, it wasn't, impressive by the defense today and them containing a mobile quarterback. My level for concern for the defense, I still wouldn't say I'm all the way there for that. LSU, they put up 700-something yards, 600-something yards against Ole Miss last week. So it's the best offense in the SEC. So my level of concern still isn't alarming. It's a bit concerning that for 2 weeks in a row, like last week against Vanderbilt, Ken Seals eventually got hot and started throwing some touchdowns there. But this Mizzou defense, as we can see, isn't the 2022 defense. Mm-hmm. It's still pretty talented, but it's not on that level of expectation that we had coming into this year, I would say.
Yeah, and I think you're not getting the same push up front that you did last year, which is odd. At defensive tackle, you have virtually the same personnel. Defensive end obviously is fairly different, but you'd expect a little bit better on that front. I think to your point about the angles, to me sometimes it just looks like, and I don't know how you go into the game with this, but that some defenders just underestimate Daniel's speed. Like he was flying by guys, and it looked like they were stunned by kind of how quick he was out in the field. And it's the type of thing you probably can't really understand until you were out there going against him. But still, at the end of the day, you need better angles. But I also just think we had arms on him a couple times throughout that game, and people couldn't bring him down. A lot of that is just credit to Daniels being an incredible player. He's been doing that since his Arizona State days. But defense has to be better. LSU is going to get its explosive plays. It's going to put numbers up on everybody. But there's certainly still concerns that you got to take away from this one. But moving on to another kind of concerning position group from today, the special teams unit, which it was up and down. It's been up and down kind of throughout the season. Harrison Mevis with that 44-yard attempt that missed kind of ended up being a pivotal moment in the game. He did, of course, hit a 50-yarder as well. You had a 17-yard punt at one point, but then you also had I forget, it was almost 75-yard punt later in the game. It's very inconsistent, and it's kind of, we asked you last week about level of concern with Mevis, and I think we're just at this point kind of getting to the point where Mevis is going to be hit or miss. Maybe he's just a long-distance guy, and it would be more beneficial to sub someone else in for short kicking. I don't know if you really have that at this point, to be fair. The punting's been a concern throughout fall camp, and you can't, a 17-yard punt in a game like this, you can't have if you expect to win, kind of as sort of an underdog in this. So, do you see more games in the future where the special teams unit kind of holds this team back?
It's not really, like you said, it's been inconsistent, pretty much going all the way back to fall camp. You talk about those plays you just mentioned. Mavis, that wasn't blocked, right? That kick wasn't blocked.
As far as we know, it was not tipped or blocked, even though it looked like it did because it was relatively short, but it seemed like it was clean.
Yeah, that's a 3-point swing right there. Then you talk about the shank punt in the third quarter. The next player and play or two later, that was a 43-yard touchdown from Jaden Daniels to Brian Thomas wide open in end zone. So that's basically a 10-point swing right there in a game where you lose the game by 10 points, and I salt to the wound, Mavis missed another field goal right before the game ended. So I don't think it's really, I've said this before, it's not all on Mavis. They've had some long snapping issues, they've had some holding issues, they've had all of that through this 2023 campaign, and it's all really kind of shown. And one thing Drinker said post-game was we've had some issues that hasn't really been corrected, and it showed up today in the loss. They finally caught up to him. So it's just something that they're going to have to continue to work on. But special teams, when they struggle like this throughout the year, that's something that is concerning to me. It's probably more concerning than where the defense is at right now, because it's something that, it really bites you. It's one of those little things that get at you.
Yeah. And I do think, going forward, it can be a debate between what we're more concerned about defense and special teams at this point. But it's the type of thing when the offense is playing at such a high level, you hate to see these other position groups kind of holding them back in ways. So now looking ahead to Lexington, Kentucky's won 8 of the past 9 over Mizzou. It's a bluegrass kind of size hump that they got to get over next week on the road against a tough team that is yet to play Georgia tonight. So we're going to reevaluate kind of where they stand after this game this evening. But going forward, the confidence level with this offense is still high, but you're going to be playing a Kentucky team next week with a really stout defense, a great running game that could probably control time possession if you let them, especially after we watched the Mizzou defense kind of get run all over today by Logan Diggs and those guys. Going into the Kentucky matchup, did today's performance change a lot about your perspective going forward on, is the SEC East still within reach? Is 9-10 wins still within reach?
I would say yes. Depending on who you ask, it's still kind of wide open. Georgia's not as impressive as we thought. But going into Kentucky, that's a tough matchup for Missouri, because they haven't won there since 2013, I believe. And, that's going to be a hard place to pick up a victory after today, what you saw with the defense. Of course, you're going to be a little scared going forward. And also looking forward to the rest of the schedule. There's no gimme games, because even after Kentucky, you have Spencer Rattler, then you have Tennessee, Georgia. All those cats you still have to play. So they're really going to have to clean those things up, special teams and defense, I think, if they want a chance at an SEC East crown in Atlanta late November, early December. So but heading into next week, they're just going to have to really just clean a lot of things up, play a more efficient game. I wouldn't say offensively, but the other two things with the special teams as well.
Yeah, and one of the big emphasis post-game that Drink and some players are talking about is that outside of Vanderbilt, who again is your East opponent that you're assuming you're going to finish above, you have every SEC East game still ahead of you. A lot of pivotal swing games coming down the line. So we'll see. We'll see how the defense continues to develop, see if some of the kicking issues get worked out. Jaden and I will be in town in Lexington for next week's game, so you will catch the next episode of Rock M Reacts live from Lexington next Saturday night.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, or the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.